The American Old West wasn't just a land of gunslingers, cattle drives, and dusty frontier towns. It was also home to some of the most practical, hearty, and surprisingly flavorful food ever cooked over an open fire. Long before fast food and processed meals took over, cowboys, pioneers, miners, and frontier families relied on simple ingredients, bold flavors, and time-tested recipes that fueled hard work and survival. Many of these dishes have been forgotten, pushed aside by modern convenience, yet they're more satisfying, more sustainable, and more authentic than most of what we eat today. In this video, we're taking a journey back to the campfires and chuck wagons of the Old West to rediscover the foods that deserve a second chance. Meals that are overdue for a comeback in modern kitchens. If you enjoy uncovering the real history behind the American Old West, leave a comment below and tell us which Old West food you'd be brave enough to try first, or which one you think should make a comeback today. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more fascinating stories, myths busted, and forgotten details from the Wild West you won't hear in the movies. Life in the Old West demanded enormous physical effort, and cowboys developed powerful appetites as a result. Long hours in the saddle, constant travel, and physically demanding ranch work required a steady intake of calories just to keep going, especially during extended cattle drives. Food wasn't a luxury, it was essential fuel. Because of this, meals held a special importance in cowboy culture. At the end of a hard day's work, eating wasn't just about comfort, it was a vital routine that helped sustain both body and morale. According to Legends of America, cowboys understood the importance of respecting the chuck wagon cook, commonly known as Cookie. His role was so critical that interfering with his work, whether by sneaking food early or tampering with equipment, was strictly frowned upon. Although meals were informal by modern standards, there was still a clear code of conduct. Cowboys typically ate while seated on the ground and used their hands, but etiquette mattered. Everyone was expected to line up promptly when the cook announced a meal, finish what was served, and avoid actions that could contaminate the food. To keep dust out of meals, running or handling horses near the chuck wagon was discouraged. Popular culture often portrays cowboys as surviving solely on beans or regularly eating large cuts of beef, but historical evidence tells a more nuanced story. Beans were common, but they were far from the only food on the menu. Likewise, fresh beef was not consumed as frequently as many assume. As historian Elizabeth Nelson of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas has noted, ranch owners generally discourage cowboys from eating cattle, since livestock represented income rather than daily provisions. Instead, cowboy meals varied depending on the cook's experience and the supplies available. Staples like bread, dried foods, coffee, preserved meats, and simple stews formed the foundation of frontier cuisine. While these meals were never extravagant, they were practical, nourishing, and designed for people living and working under demanding conditions. Beef jerky. Food taken on cattle drives in the Old West had to satisfy strict practical requirements. Without access to refrigeration, anything carried on the trail needed to last for long periods without spoiling. Space on the chuck wagon was limited, so foods also had to be lightweight, compact, and easy to transport. These limitations often meant that taste took a backseat to necessity. One common example was hardtack, an extremely dense, dry cracker that could last for months but was nearly inedible on its own. Historical accounts describe it as so tough that it usually had to be softened in coffee, water, or soup before it could be eaten. Despite its durability, hardtack was widely disliked and consumed only because few alternatives existed. Even so, flavor still mattered more than many people assume. Sources such as history hit note that a skilled chuck wagon cook could greatly improve morale on the trail. In fact, a cook with a strong reputation could attract workers, making good food an unexpected but valuable asset for ranchers assembling cattle driving crews. One food that met nearly all the practical and nutritional needs of life on the trail was smoked jerky. Cowboys commonly prepared their own jerky, using beef or wild game such as deer, elk, or bison, depending on what was available. Compared to modern commercial versions, historic jerky was usually much drier, tougher, and chewier. but it was rich in flavor and provided a reliable source of protein. For these same reasons, jerky remains a practical food today. Its long shelf life, portability, and high protein content make it well suited for hiking, camping, and travel. While modern versions are often more refined, the basic appeal hasn't changed. Jerky is still a simple, efficient food that delivers energy when and where it's needed. Stewed beans. Stewed beans are one of the foods most commonly linked to cowboy life in the Old West. However, historical sources, such as Legends of America, indicate that beans were not eaten as constantly as popular imagery suggests. While dried beans were a regular item on chuckwagon supply lists due to their long shelf life and low weight, preparing them required time, water, and steady heat, resources that were not always readily available after a demanding day on the trail. As a result, beans appeared on the menu periodically rather than daily. When circumstances allowed, cowboys did enjoy them, especially when a cook had the time to prepare them properly. Their presence reflected practicality rather than culinary preference, shaped by the realities of life on cattle drives. One preparation that translates well to modern tastes involves cooking beans with bacon. Food scientist and chef Michael Murdy has noted that this method produces a dish that many people today would find both familiar and satisfying. In this approach, pinto beans and bacon are slowly cooked together in a Dutch oven over an open flame or campfire. The bacon adds a rich, savory depth, while the beans contribute an earthy balance to the dish. Cooking over high heat from a fire also introduces a subtle smoky flavor that cannot be replicated on a stovetop. Simple to prepare and requiring only basic ingredients, this meal works just as well for outdoor gatherings or casual camping trips today as it did on the frontier. Cowboy coffee. Coffee played an important role in daily life for cowboys in the Old West, serving as a reliable source of energy during long, demanding days. Their preferred method, now known as cowboy coffee, involved boiling coarsely ground coffee in a metal pot directly over an open fire. The simple technique required no filters or specialized tools, making it ideal for life on the trail or at a remote camp. By modern standards, boiling coffee is often discouraged, especially among specialty coffee enthusiasts who are taught to avoid high heat in order to prevent bitterness. Even large coffee chains typically warn against letting coffee boil. However, historical practice and firsthand experience suggest that the frontier method deserves a fair assessment. According to longtime chuckwagon cook and Western historian Kent Rollins, properly prepared cowboy coffee can be surprisingly smooth. Rollins has explained that when the process is done correctly, boiling the grounds can reduce harsh flavors and lessen the acidic qualities that often cause stomach discomfort. Many people who normally avoid coffee due to acidity have reported finding cowboy coffee easier to drink. Because it relies on basic equipment, cowboy coffee remains a practical option for modern situations as well. It works well for camping trips, outdoor cooking, or any setting where traditional coffee makers are unavailable or impractical. The method aligns closely with historical usage, emphasizing function and simplicity rather than refinement. For those still concerned about bitterness, there is a traditional technique that has gained renewed attention. Culinary experts, including those at America's Test Kitchen, have noted that adding clean eggshells to the pot before boiling can help mellow the brew. This old-fashioned trick reflects the kind of practical problem-solving that defined frontier cooking and offers a useful tip for coffee drinkers today. Rocky Mountain oysters. A food philosophy that has gained modern popularity under the name nose-to-tail eating has deep historical roots. This approach emphasizes using every edible part of an animal rather than discarding large portions, a concept that was once simply described as avoiding waste. As outlined by sources such as Clean Eating, nose-to-tail cooking encourages a broader range of flavors while also reducing waste and making better use of the resources involved in raising livestock. Beyond its sustainability benefits, this style of eating has long been economical. Cuts that are often overlooked today, including organ meats and tougher portions, were traditionally affordable and nourishing. For people living close to the land, these foods were practical, filling, and too valuable to discard. Cowboys of the Old West naturally followed these principles. They regularly hunted game and were frequently present during the processing of cattle, which meant they had access to parts of the animal rarely seen on modern menus. For working cowboys who burned enormous calories each day, meat was an essential and highly valued food, and wasting any of it simply wasn't an option. Some byproducts of routine ranch work were also incorporated into meals rather than discarded. Historical accounts noted by Gastro Obscura explain that certain ranching tasks produced edible parts that cowboys chose to prepare and eat. These were typically breaded and cooked over high heat, turning an otherwise unused resource into a filling dish. Today, one of these preparations survives as a regional specialty in the American West, commonly known as Rocky Mountain oysters. While unusual to some diners, the dish reflects the practical, resourceful mindset of frontier cooking. For those interested in traditional foodways or reducing food waste, it offers a glimpse into how earlier generations made the most of what they had. Pemmican. In recent years, modern food culture has shown growing interest in ingredients and diets rooted in the distant past. Ancient grains once common thousands of years ago, such as einkorn and spelt, have reappeared in artisanal baking and specialty foods, as noted by Clean Technica. Likewise, popular eating patterns like the paleo diet aim to mirror what are believed to be earlier, more natural ways of eating, according to Nutrition Today. This renewed focus on traditional foods has historical parallels in the American West. One food with deep ancestral origins that found its way into cowboy life was pemmican. Described by Britannica as a compact mixture of rendered fat and finely dried meat, often from game animals, pemmican sometimes included berries for added flavor and nutrition. The recipe varied by region and availability, but the core purpose remained the same. Cowboys were introduced to pemmican through Native American food traditions as documented by History Hit. Its appeal was straightforward. Pemmican was easy to carry, resisted spoilage, and packed a high concentration of calories and protein into a small portion. For people covering long distances or working far from reliable food sources, it was an ideal solution. Over time, pemmican has earned a reputation as a highly efficient and nourishing food. Early 20th century anthropologist Vilhjalmur Stefansson famously spent extended periods living with Inuit communities in Alaska while consuming little more than pemmican and water. In later accounts, he reported feeling exceptionally healthy during that time, a testament to the food's nutritional density. For modern readers interested in tasting a piece of culinary history while also meeting high-protein needs, pemmican offers a rare connection between ancient food practices and frontier life in the American West. Rascal stew. Rascal stew, sometimes referred to by other, less polite names, was another example of how Old West cooking embraced the idea of using every edible part of an animal. Prepared along cattle trails, the stew reflected a practical, resource-conscious approach to food that left little to waste. According to historical accounts summarized by Art of Manliness, the dish was made from a mix of organ meats. These could include the heart, liver, brains, thymus, often called sweetbreads, and marrow-related components. While such ingredients may seem unusual today, they were considered valuable sources of nutrition and flavor on the frontier. Rather than being viewed as undesirable, organ meats were often regarded as a rare treat. Historian Elizabeth Nelson, an associate professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, has explained that fresh meat was difficult to obtain on cattle drives. Without refrigeration, it spoiled quickly, and ranch owners discouraged workers from regularly consuming cattle meant for market. As a result, most trail meals relied on preserved foods such as salt pork or dried meat. When fresh beef did become available, it was an uncommon opportunity, and cooks made full use of every usable portion. Stews like Rascal stew allowed cowboys to enjoy these ingredients while honoring a deeply practical tradition rooted in efficiency and respect for limited resources. Wild mushrooms. Cowboys on the Old West cattle trails often added to their rations by gathering food from the surrounding landscape. In addition to hunting and collecting edible plants, some foraged for wild mushrooms. Even in the dry regions of the western United States, certain edible mushroom species were available, as noted by historical foraging sources. However, identifying safe mushrooms was a challenge. Many edible varieties closely resemble toxic ones, making accurate identification difficult without specialized knowledge. Because of this uncertainty, a large number of cowboys avoided mushrooms entirely, deciding that the risks outweighed the potential reward given the already demanding conditions of life on the range. That said, some individuals were more willing to forage. Those who did so typically focused on mushroom species that were visually distinct and had few or no dangerous lookalikes. Among the safest choices were morels, known for their tall, honeycomb-like caps, and puffball mushrooms, which are round and easily recognizable. Today, morels are considered a seasonal delicacy and are highly valued when they appear at local markets. Giant puffballs, which can grow to impressive sizes, are abundant in certain regions and remain popular among modern foragers. Both varieties are versatile in the kitchen, often breaded and cooked, incorporated into soups, or sliced thin and used as a substitute for pasta sheets in layered dishes. Whether in the past or the present, responsible foraging requires caution. Accurate identification remains essential, and anyone gathering wild mushrooms should seek confirmation from an experienced expert before preparing them for a meal. Locally foraged greens and herbs. Even the most skilled chuck wagon cooks worked with strict limitations. Space on the trail was scarce, and only foods that could last without spoiling were practical to carry. Historian Elizabeth Nelson of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas has documented that common supplies included basics such as flour, dried meat, beans, cornmeal, coffee, salt pork or bacon, molasses, vinegar, salt, dried fruit, and cooking fats like beef suet or lard. With experience, a capable cook could turn these simple staples into filling meals. Still, relying on the same ingredients day after day often resulted in repetitive flavors and little visual variety. Even for hard-working cowboys, eating the same foods continuously could become tiresome. To add freshness and variety, cowboys sometimes supplemented their meals by gathering edible plants from the surrounding landscape. According to sources like Ask a Prepper, foraged greens and herbs provided both color and new flavors. What was available depended largely on geography and season. In some areas, cowboys might find watercress, lamb's quarters, or wild asparagus, while elsewhere they could come across wild garlic, chicory, or sage. Many of these plants remain available today, yet they are often overlooked by modern eaters. As noted by Wild Edible, wild greens typically contain higher concentrations of certain vitamins and minerals than cultivated produce. Foraging also encourages a closer connection to the natural environment, echoing the practical habits of frontier life. That said, foraging requires knowledge and care. Anyone interested in gathering wild plants should learn from an experienced guide and become familiar with the edible species in their region. If there is any uncertainty about a plant's safety, it is best left untouched. Cowboy stew. Chuck wagon cooks on the cattle trails worked with very basic equipment, which shaped what could realistically be prepared over an open fire. Historian Elizabeth Nelson of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas has explained that cooking tools were few, and this lack of equipment naturally limited the range of dishes cowboys could eat. Most meals were prepared using heavy, multi-purpose cookware. Common tools included the Dutch oven, a cast-iron pot designed for slow cooking, and the spider, a shallow, lidded skillet with legs that allowed it to sit directly in hot coals. In some cases, pots were suspended over the fire on iron bars. These methods favored simple one-pot meals. Because of these constraints, stews became a staple on the trail. While there were no written recipes passed down, cooks relied on experience and improvisation. As Nelson has noted, cowboy cooking was practical rather than formal, and each cook developed their own approach based on available ingredients. This likely resulted in countless variations of what was broadly known as cowboy stew. A key objective of these stews was to make meat tender and flavorful. According to research shared by the George Ranch Historical Park, cattle in the 19th century were typically lean, especially before widespread crossbreeding. Lean cuts benefited from slow cooking at low temperatures, making stewing an ideal method. Food scientist Michael Murdy has also pointed out that canned vegetables, such as tomatoes and carrots, frequently found their way into these stews, adding both nutrition and flavor. This combination of slow-cooked meat and preserved vegetables produced a filling, economical meal. Sarsaparilla. For many people today, sarsaparilla is familiar mainly from classic Western films. It often appears as a joke, ordered by a lone character at the saloon, while others choose stronger spirits. This portrayal has helped cement the idea that sarsaparilla was little more than a novelty drink in the Old West. In reality, sarsaparilla played a much more meaningful role in frontier life. Cowboy historian Chip Schweiger has noted that the beverage was genuinely popular among cowboys, valued not only for its flavor, but also for its supposed health benefits. At the time, many people believed it offered medicinal properties, which made it especially appealing in remote areas with limited access to medical care. The drink was made from the root of a North American plant related to ginseng, according to the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Its use dates back to the 16th century, when Spanish explorers and soldiers viewed it as a remedy for certain illnesses. By the 19th century, Americans widely credited sarsaparilla with a variety of restorative effects, even if those claims were not scientifically proven by modern standards. In terms of flavor, sarsaparilla is often compared to root beer. Historical records show that it was a key ingredient in some early versions of root beer, alongside herbs such as wintergreen. Beverage producers have described the plant extract as slightly bitter, a quality typically balanced with sweeter additions like licorice. The result is a drink that resembles root beer, but with a stronger, more pronounced character. Modern descriptions often note a deeper flavor with a subtle bitter edge. Sarsaparilla is still associated with traditional wellness claims, including easing digestive discomfort, reflecting the long-standing belief that it offers both refreshment and mild therapeutic value. Hardtack. Let's be honest, hardtack is not likely to win over anyone seeking rich flavors or soft textures. Dense, dry, and extremely firm, it was never designed to be eaten straight from the hand. Even so, its purpose was never comfort food, it was survival food. For people who spend time backpacking or camping, or for those who keep emergency supplies in areas prone to natural disasters, hardtack still makes practical sense. According to the Texas Historical Commission, it served as a dependable food for generations of sailors and cowboys because it could be stored for long periods without spoiling. Made from just flour, water, and salt, hardtack's simplicity was its greatest strength. The key to understanding hardtack is to think of it as an ingredient rather than a finished dish. Much like dry pasta, it becomes edible only after being softened and combined with other foods. On the frontier, cowboys commonly soaked hardtack in hot coffee, soup, or broth until it absorbed enough liquid to be palatable. In some cases, the softened pieces were even cooked further to improve texture and flavor. This approach remains useful today. Outdoor enthusiasts who rely on lightweight, freeze-dried meals may find that these portions aren't always satisfying on their own. One practical solution, suggested by experienced hikers, is to crumble hardtack into the meal pouch before adding hot water. After allowing time for everything to rehydrate, the result is a more filling and energy-dense dish. While hardtack may never be appealing on its own, its durability, versatility, and historical reliability explain why it remained a staple for people living and traveling under demanding conditions. The foods of the Old West were never about luxury. They were about ingenuity, endurance, and making the most of what was available. From portable trail staples and slow-simmered stews to foraged greens and time-tested drinks, frontier food tells a story of survival, resourcefulness, and deep practical wisdom. In many ways, these meals feel more relevant than ever in a world rediscovering sustainability, simplicity, and real nourishment. What Old West food do you think deserves a comeback first? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoy uncovering the real history behind frontier life, subscribe to the channel for more fascinating stories, forgotten traditions, and myth-busting truths about the American Old West.